Welcome to the ChangeMakers Podcast, produced by cityCURRENT and powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are leading by example, fueling positive change and making a difference so we can learn and do the same.
We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose.
Now here's your host, Andrew Bartolotta.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers Podcast, produced by cityCURRENT and powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta, and on this episode, we're diving into childhood development, the importance of play, innovative educational spaces, and more with Dr. Stewart Burgess, the Executive Director of the Children's Museum of Memphis. And with over 25 years dedicated to childhood development, Dr. Burgess has profoundly impacted early childhood education and learning environments. So we'll explore his journey, his innovative work, and the inspiring vision he has for the future, both at CMOM and childhood development as well. Dr. Stewart Burgess, thank you so much for coming on the ChangeMakers Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Okay, so we're a big fan of you and your work and see it firsthand at the Children's Museum of Memphis, but let's go all the way back to your childhood. Talk a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up.
Right after the last pyramid was built, I learned a lot about how young children learn. If I go all the way back and think about really some of my earliest memories about that would influence my trajectory as a professional, they go way back. They go a strange but vivid memory of when I was 5 or 6 years old. And at early memories, long-term memories don't usually consolidate until about 5 or 6. So that fits well with the literature. Our next door neighbors had a new baby. And within a couple of weeks, they brought the baby over. It was wintertime. We had a fire going in the fireplace. And even though I was little, they put the baby in my arms in a rocking chair in front of the fire. And like many of us, I love to zone out in front of the fire already. Just found it cozy and kind of mesmerizing. And if anyone's ever had a baby sleep on their chest before, it's amazing. It is such a peaceful, connected, soft feeling. And I think I was there for about an hour. It was nothing like I'd ever experienced before. And it's something that has stayed with me today, all the way to today, strangely. I wrote about it in my letters to get into graduate school programs and things like that. And say along the way, other things that kind of shaped my interest in early learning include parents that were really avid readers. There were books stacked everywhere. Parents that were excited about what they did professionally, just real engaged in what they were doing and were always growing and excited about it. An active language environment, like parents that discussed what was going on in the world around with us, the children. And then I was a real people watcher from a very young age. So the airport is still to this day a great location to just see all kinds of different people interacting and going about their lives. I can remember as early as kindergarten and first grade observing how the teachers interacted with the students and the students interacted with each other. I should have been doing my work, I think, but I was observing. I remember in first grade watching a little girl across the work table from me raising her hand, and she was stuck. Her brow was furrowed. She couldn't do the next problem, and she was really trying. And 2 boys sitting next to her were misbehaving, and the teacher kept trying to address her needs, but instead she spent the entire period having to try to handle the 2 boys who were misbehaving. And I remember very distinctly, like it was just a couple years ago, not a zillion years ago, that I thought, that's not fair. That's not fair that her needs aren't getting met when she's trying to do her best, and the teacher's not being allowed to do her best when she's trying because somebody's misbehaving. And so there were things like that along the way that were probably little telltale signs that I would show an interest, a long-standing interest in children's trajectory and what's fair and right in terms of their right to grow and find their best selves. So it's kind of been a lifelong journey on a similar path.
I love that you can pinpoint some of those early memories and how they've really impacted you throughout your work. What is maybe one or two family traditions that you had maybe through the holidays or strong held will by your parents that you remember to this day that really shaped who you were?
A lot of warmth and closeness and family stories might be the very first thing. We're a very storytelling sort of family, and we relive our experiences together as a family when we get together with a lot of laughter, a lot of poking in the ribs at each other, with each other. It keeps the memories alive and keeps the bond of the family together. So I think that was the thing that was predominantly, like, the food was there, the table was lovely, we were all gathered, but it was really about sharing our experiences together. And that actually shaped more than I would have thought. It's that active language environment and really sort of thinking about the meanings of what transpires for us as a group and how we connected and what was funny. So those kinds of things.
That's great. Okay, so let's move on a little bit into any specific experiences or mentors during your childhood that really guided your career path.
Childhood, my mom was an interior designer and an artist, and she was always working on her profession and her craft. It was, there were rooms dedicated in the house to the artwork and to the designs going on. My dad was a contractor and developer. That meant we had architects over and plans for buildings. And so there was all this generative build it and make it, appealing and accessible discussion going on, always some art in progress around, and then all the stacks of books. And then I always say, like, one of the really formative things for me that was super important as a tether or an anchor was every day when I came home from school in elementary school, my mom and I would sit up in her room in a couple of overstuffed chairs, and I would download my whole day to her. I don't know how she lived through the monotony of hearing about first, second, and third grade minutia every day ad nauseum, but it was so grounding for me that somebody was interested enough to listen to all the minutia, and that people watcher part of me meant I'd gathered a lot of data during the day about everybody's interactions with each other, the teachers with the teachers with the students, students with the students, people with me. And so I think I was gathering data about people and needed to download it and have somebody value that it was important to me. It was super connecting for the two of us. And it's hard to imagine not having had that. So I would say that. And then I had a couple of, I feel like I was really lucky to have some teachers early on who loved their work. You could tell that that's what they were supposed to be doing. They were passionate about it. They liked the kids. They respected the kids. They were excited about learning. They worked hard to turn problems on their ear if even one person in the room didn't get it, and wouldn't move on until we did that. And so I would say I can point to several teachers along the way that were just so knowledgeable, passionate, flexible, creative, attentive, that made learning a safe space, a fun space, supported space.
That's great. I love that your mom and you had that bond, and I feel like it was very therapeutic for you as well, because as a child taking in all of that information, I can imagine was a lot for you, especially as a people watcher. So like you said, you're collecting this data from all different viewpoints, and then to really download it to your mom. I'm wondering, looking back, if some of those moments for her helped fuel some creativity, or at least learn from a different generation on maybe what's going on. And so it's really cool also that your parents were both in the design and construction field, because then later on in life, being at CMOM and going through now renovations, and also from the STEAM side, I think that there's a lot of synergy there from your childhood that you're now able to capture some experiences there and then bring it into the Children's Museum. But before we talk about the Children's Museum, what motivated you to then pursue a degree in psychology and social behavior?
I originally thought that I would become a child clinical psychologist and was on that path. I was a psych major right from I declared when I was a freshman in college. And I took all the courses that you would take to be getting into the graduate programs that you'd want to do. Along the way, I got a master's separately and then a PhD in a different program. One of the ways to make sure that you could get into the top-notch PhD clinical child programs, which were super well sought after. There were more people applying to those programs than applying to medical school. And so the window to get in was pretty tiny. The things that you needed to do included working with professors on their research, getting yourself on publications. And along the way, I fell in love with what was normal and amazing about child development. Truly fell in love. My first developmental psych class as an undergraduate, just out of luck. And I think I've had a lot of luck in my career, a lot of hard work, but a lot of luck. My first developmental psych class was from a professor who did his postdoc, the work right after his PhD in Paris with Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget being basically the inventor of child development as we know, as a field, as we know it today, and who really shaped our Western approach to early education. So there's a person where I'm getting like sort of really close to direct to the source of the top of the field in my very first introduction to here's how children grow and learn. Here's how they thrive and survive. And so I was amazed at that. I loved the experimental design in all the experiments that were presented along the way. I love testing and measurement courses where you looked at the research methods and whether or not the studies parameters actually would allow the researchers to make the claims they're making. And that, and my mind worked well for that. So it seemed to be easy where sometimes people had trouble following that dotted line. I could do that argument really well about why or why not they could have the power to say that. And then I did research with people who became mentors who just so happened to be top in their field. So in my master's program, I worked with Larry Fenson, who's definitely a key mentor in my career. Larry was, before I got there, already the premier name in play and playful learning in the world, definitely in the country, but I think globally. If you looked up an article on play in animals, you'd also see one reference to there's a huge body of research on play in children, and they would refer just to him. So it was sort of a big deal. He had moved on by the time I came to his lab as a graduate student. He had moved on to researching early language development, early concept development, and problem solving. And I was passionately interested in all of those cognitive developments. His lab was brilliantly designed and pretty cutting edge. And we were able to do a series of studies that took some pretty large bodies of work that claimed that children under 6 couldn't do a lot of abstract thinking in their heads and hypothesis test generating and testing and things like that. And we were able to prove that they absolutely do, and they do it all the time. It's a matter of making the conditions simple enough for them to be able to demonstrate what they're doing. And so I immediately got to be doing some stuff that was groundbreaking with somebody who was top of the field That's not my fault. That was my luck. And it jumps you a little bit to the head of the discussion because you're getting the real facts, the current up to the minute knowledge from people who are the top of the field. So that was just a blessing, not in any kind of disguise. It was a huge blessing.
That's amazing. And so did you stay at University of California, Irvine for the entire undergraduate, graduate, doctorate, or did you sort of move on from there?
So I'm born and raised in Fresno, California, a town that is a little bit like Memphis in a lot of its structures, strengths, and weaknesses. I went to Fresno State on a swimming scholarship and paid for college with that. Had told myself I was going to college, but I was definitely not going to Fresno State. It was an amazing experience, and that's where I had that first developmental psych class. I went on to get a master's in experimental child development in San Diego, and then the PhD separately at University of California, Irvine.
Nice. Okay. So throughout California, what was the focus of your PhD research and how did it contribute to the field of early childhood education?
I was looking at, with my mentor there, Linda Levine, who does seminal work in the area of the influence of basic emotions on cognitive processes. So basic emotions like happiness, sadness, anger, fear. And then cognitive processes, thinking, decision-making, memory, suggestibility being whether or not if somebody asks you a leading question, like on a witness stand, would you be susceptible to giving them the kind of answer they're leading you toward instead of one that's representative of what really happened, that sort of thing. I was very interested in the memory and suggestibility pieces. And she brought the emotion pieces, and we did kind of groundbreaking research. My dissertation study got published in child development or developmental psychology, which is the premier journal. That doesn't usually happen with your dissertations, but it was timely work. So we were able to show that through experimental conditions of helping young children 4 to 6 experience some happiness, sadness, or anger, that it influenced their memory for the event, the experimental event, and the informational content in that event in different ways. So, for example, happiness caused an increase in memory for all types of information in the experience, and a significant reduction in their suggestibility with leading questions. So if you had an experience that you felt was successful and it made you feel happiness, you had significantly higher memory for all the big and small details in that event, and you were extremely resistant to being led to say, this happened when it didn't. They were very clear about their knowledge and would stand by it if they were happy about it. And that actually informs why make learning fun. That it actually, your memory will be stronger and your confidence about your memory will be stronger. You're less likely to lose it and stick by it. So that's a big deal. And going into that study before, there was huge, more than 50, 60 years of literature and research with a big stack of studies that indicated that emotional events caused memory to get better. Like take a picture of the moment that freezes it in time and make your memory better and make your suggestibility lower. And there was an equally impressive, equal size luminary researchers in memory, both sides of this debate, that had found that emotional events caused memory to go down, for us to lose details about our memory, and for suggestibility then to go up as our memories got foggier. And what that means when you have a body of literature where you've got equal amounts of legitimate research that are finding opposite results is that you haven't isolated the right variable yet. There's something else carrying the variance that is more predictive than what you're actually looking at. And so we split the emotions into different specific emotion instead of just intensity of emotion without a label of which kind. We went for discrete emotions, happiness, sadness, and anger, and rated their intensity of the emotional reaction as well, and then looked at memory and suggestibility, and no one had done that yet. And actually, there was one study that came out of UCLA that just got published while I was defending my dissertation, darn it. But I had to answer questions about that, and I only read it the night before it just came out. And so, but it the other things were that sadness decreases memory for the event that caused sadness for all types of information, small and large. So it really ruins your memory and really increases your suggestibility. Children are much more susceptible to leading questions, to being led to say something that didn't happen happened if they were sad about the event. And then anger tends to sharpen and young children and adults, really, because more studies have been done, anger tends to sharpen our focus on the thing that thwarted our goal, the thing that made us mad. So anger makes us focus in on that problem that thwarted us. And then all the things that we didn't focus in, our memory fades to gray on. We don't take in that information as well. And so we're highly resistant to suggestion about the thing that made us mad. And our memory is probably very accurate about the thing that made us mad. But all those peripheral details related to that you'd normally expect somebody to notice, the madder you were, the more those would go away. And so you have bad memory about those and be very suggestible to leading questions. In a courtroom for young children on the stand, in cases from everything from abuse of various kinds to custody disputes, young children are at a great disadvantage for whether or not they're going to be believed. And it's easy to lead them to say something different than what really happened because they're really strongly wired to try and get what the adult's looking for so they can stop being questioned. And so it was very important to me and to many researchers to sort of bolster our ability to get accurate information from young children while also understanding their inaccuracies so we could predict which bits of their memory reports would be highly accurate and which would be less accurate and more suspicious and susceptible to leading questions.
That is absolutely fascinating. And the amount of research that you had to conduct to come to these ideas and what is actually going on with these different emotions is incredible. So I love that you really dove into the minutia and the different emotions. And one question, which is a little silly, that comes from this is, okay, so how accurate do you find that the movies Inside Out and Inside Out 2 would be? Have you seen them? What company? Because I would think I would bring you in as an expert when it comes to these emotions and the different reactions because of them, because of your research. So have you seen the movies? And
I'm so embarrassed. I have not seen them, and now I have to go see them.
Yes.
Now I have to see them, and we'll have to talk again because I would love to see that. And I have trouble putting my research knowledge on a shelf and not thinking that way when I'm reading books and when I'm out in the world and when I'm watching movies. So, and then just as an aside, like when I get called for potential jury duty service, they don't take me. They won't let me on juries because they ask me about what my background is and they find out. And so the last one, just like the ones before, they say, so would you be somebody who would say that memory changes over time rather than being like a photograph and a picture that is static? And I'm like, absolutely. And not only would I be one who said that, so would the entire research world into memory. And they're like, you're excused. So funny. Some of that too, when you look at emotion, there's some longer ranging studies, more longitudinal studies too, so there's an indication also that as your emotion changes for an event, because your emotion doesn't stay exactly the same all the time, it fades a little bit. It gets less strong as you get further from events in many cases. And so as your emotion changes about an event, your memory can get overwritten and changed. So that's pretty tricky, but you'd have to know what was the original emotional reaction and how strong was it to an event so that you could figure out what the original memory, what was encoded originally, what memory tracks were laid down in the first place based on what emotion you felt and how strongly. And then later find out, how do you report your feelings about that event now, and try to guesstimate how that may have modified your memories.
That, once again, fascinating. And I'm thinking just personally on my life, my wife and I, we met in high school. And so we, just like many high school relationships, they ebb and flow. And long story short, we ended up back together and now have 3 toddlers of our own. But I think whenever we are talking about some of our high school memories and the different emotions that come across for me, she'll be like, "You don't remember that?" And I'm like, "No, for me, it was a time of either depression or anxiety or embarrassment or all these different emotions." And so it's really funny or not funny, but very eye-opening for us to look back at a similar experience or part of the same experience, but immediately recalling it differently because of just the emotions that we had during that time. So, I mean, obviously your research is so important in shaping how those emotions are felt and then the memory within that. So I'm glad to know that I'm not just getting early Alzheimer's, hopefully.
No, and
it's memories.
It's really fascinating. I came away feeling like I learned some things that I wasn't looking for, that I wasn't expecting, in terms of how the whole cognitive and emotional system possibly fits together. We think of emotion as a different side of the brain, a different side of the personality and our behavior and functioning than our thinking and cognition. And actually, there are different parts of the brain that are more responsible for emotion than for thinking. And the emotion activation area of the brain tends to be quicker than the prefrontal cortex, that is the thinking, evaluating part of the brain. So little kids, when they get upset, it kind of disengages when the emotional part of the brain gets revved up, it disengages the prefrontal cortex until they calm back down. And we spend all this time reasoning with them and trying to explain why they could do a reason. You can do this in 15 minutes. You don't need to throw a fit about it. 15 minutes isn't very long. It doesn't matter because they've lost the ability to think right at that moment, and they just need to calm down and then try to think, that sort of thing. Those were things that I knew a little bit. One of the things I didn't know was that emotion probably is both a lens on your camera in the world to help direct you towards information that is important and weed out information that is not important, so that it reduces the cognitive processing demands for the amount of information. If there's something that would make you afraid or angry and it's intense, you need to hone in on that thing so you can fix it. And all the other minutia, the color of the walls, what people are wearing, the sounds going on, all that is unnecessary information that will slow your processing down. And so the lens hones in on a serious problem to the exclusion of all these other details. The other thing that it does, and that actually helps us know how to evaluate and then behave. So there's a functional lens thing, and those are my words, not the industry's words. And then I think from a memory standpoint, it's used to kind of color code the tabs on the files of memories stored in your cognitive system, so that you can also pull up things that were strongly emotional better than things that were mundane.
I love the lens analogy, and even just like the file folders. I remember when I was younger and I would pray, I would, like, in my mind, I would sort of like look up and compose an email and then hit send. So just like when you're thinking about ways, or just like referring to memories, just like in your mind, looking back and having those file folders and just pulling it in your head, like, yes, yeah, there you go. And even like honing in on the lens of the important parts, and then just like letting go of, like you said, wall colors or what people were wearing or whatnot. Like, it makes total sense when you think about it, but just the amount of research that you've had to conduct to then come up to these solutions is just fascinating. So you have your dissertation, you're Dr. Stewart Burgess, you're there you go. You are really honing in on the field of childhood development. So then you go into the field and you're at Brilliant Beginnings, you're at St. George's Independent School. Talk about those roles and how, or maybe some of the other ones that I may have not mentioned that really then bring you in and influence your approach to the early childhood education space.
Sure. Very shortly, I mean, immediately upon finishing my PhD, I accepted the job offer a week or two before I defended my dissertation. I went to, and this was in Southern California, I went to a startup company called Brilliant Beginnings. It was a sister company of about 6 startup companies created by Bob and Jan Davidson, who had made their $1 billion originally off of Reader Rabbit and Jumpstart Toddler. So those first CD-ROM games, you may not even be old enough to remember that. The first CD-ROM games that were colorful, playful, game-like programming, but that were designed for young children to interface with the computer for learning purposes. So they weren't just for entertainment. They were strictly designed for child development, but they looked like Saturday morning cartoons from back in the day. And everybody had computers at the time, but nobody had anything like that. And those things just flew off the shelves. And so their next step, Bob and Jan's next sort of visionary step, was to create multiple companies to try and do that journey again and to influence more child development around the world. And Brilliant Beginnings was a company where we worked with luminary professors across areas of development to process all of the research that would be actionable. So not theories that were unsubstantiated, but things that parents and educators could actually do in their children's lives that would make a difference in their developmental trajectory. So we would read all the studies for a whole year of life, birth to 1 to 2, et cetera, and hone in on every study that had some action that had been substantiated, and then write books and related materials for educators and for parents. And it was the true quintessential startup experience where I was working 70 hours a week often. And we had a small child and then a baby on the way at the time too. So it was the best of times and worst of times in many ways. I was working on 3 to 6 hours of sleep a night. 6 was rare. 3 and 4 were normal. And reading everything that I was supposed to read in stacks and stacks of research, and then starting to write the outlines and write the chapters for the books that would go out to teachers and parents. We got to, because it was a startup company, I think I was employee number 16 or 17 in that company, but it meant we were so small, I got to wear a lot of hats. I got to help pick the children that would go on the covers and inside chapters of the books, the child models that would be used. Got to help design the photo shoots so that they'd be fun for the kids and a great day instead of stressful and long and boring. We got to work on marketing ideas and run brainstorming groups with parents and teachers to see what they needed. And then just all let's turn the research into something that is inspiring and actionable, really approachable. And so we did a lot of presentations. We were, in Barnes and Nobles and all those kinds of things, plus behind the scenes doing teacher trainings, and we won a bunch of awards. And then we lost our funding. It was sort of the beginning of the end of sort of the bookstore era, where you're starting to see big chains start to struggle in the book market. And there we were, a little entity. We were probably going to be a $6 million business rather than a $6 billion company. And so we ended up losing our funding. And that was something that I hadn't pictured happening. Obviously, when you go into a startup, it's a big risk and you put everything you got into it because time is ticking away in front of you. I'm so proud of the work, to be honest. I probably shouldn't say that. I think the work was really amazing. And it was truly a team of amazing people who collaborated to create it. And it was really bizarre to be standing at an award ceremony, collecting like all the awards at the ceremony. And then 2 weeks later, packing those trophies into boxes and shutting down the company. And so that was a time of, okay, what now? That was a lot of time away from my family. So I would leave before they were up in the morning and come back at 7 p.m., eat dinner late, put them to bed, including my wife, and then stay up till 3 working, get a couple of hours of sleep. And we just had a baby at that point when we were closing down. And my wife said, could you please stay home a little bit and help me with this? And we were able to do that. So we ended up moving to Memphis actually for her work. She was a biomedical engineer, recently retired, and became a vice president of biologics product development at an orthopedic product development company in Memphis. And her family was here, and we had 2 small children. And I didn't know what I was going to do in Memphis because developmental psychologists are academics. Almost, 98% are professors doing research and teaching at universities. And I could do that, but it wasn't the right season to apply because we came in spring and that was all done. So I'd have to wait half a year to start applying to anything that would come. Those jobs are rare. There might be 6 or 8 of them in the nation on a single year cycle. So you usually in academia have to be willing to go anywhere in the country where the best job is.
Yeah.
Instead of picking a city. And I accidentally ran across, for St. George's Independent School, I actually ran across St. George's when we were looking for schools for our kids, for kindergarten, for our oldest son. And they found out what I did and that I didn't know what I was going to do next. I thought, I think I'll write the next book so that I don't have to be gone from my family all the time, consulting all over the place. And instead, I took a job as an early learning, early childhood director at this amazing, amazing program that I fell in love with on the tour that was everything was custom designed. Everything was beautiful, colorful, artistic, hands-on, a little ahead, but built in little bitty steps. The teachers loved what they were doing and they were the architects of the curriculum, and you could see that in the delivery. The children loved coming to school and you could feel it and see it. Their art and work were on the walls everywhere throughout the school, and the smiles were on the teachers' faces, the staff's faces, the kids' faces, the parents' faces. It was a kind of a rare learning environment. And I thought I might work there for a couple of years and that would inform the consulting that I would do, because I was already starting to consult for toy and book companies and schools, but I had never worked in a school other than a university. And so it seemed appropriate. They also had an innovative, really, truly innovative, written up in the New York Times, 3-campus model where they created a satellite sister campus that was all scholarship, all the funding for that provided by an anonymous donor group, and to the tune of many millions of dollars. And they had built it because Memphis had the distinct need. And they had built it because their school, everybody, their families and teachers and students loved it so much, and the success was so good. They thought everybody needs to be exposed to this and everybody deserves to be exposed to this. So we need to create this. What they hadn't done, to be candid, is they didn't know the research on that we knew that about what a big task that was going to be. And so they kind of build it and they will come and succeed. And I thought I could help a fair amount in kind of pulling that together to make sure that we didn't fall on our faces on that. And we did brilliantly through that. It worked really super well and still is.
Well, I love that you're talking also about the incredible work and mission of St. George's Independent School, because it truly is a brilliant model that is just, like you said, celebrated nationwide. And I think that, like you said, you plan to be there for a while and you end up being there for 18 years.
Yeah.
And so truly, clearly, you love the work that you were doing there. And I think, as a father with 3 toddlers moving into kindergarten in the next 48 months or less, I think it's so important, and you start to realize how important it is where your children are spending most of their time. And you for one, we're in this season where we feel like, just, can someone watch my kids, please? Anyone. I don't care what you're doing with them. Stick them in front of the TV, whatever. But
summers are so hard for working families. So, and nobody talks about that. Or like when you get, as you're a young parent, and your kids need school and you have to earn money. So you're at work. You're like, and I can't work with them around my ankles all the time because they don't allow me to get anything done. And you need somewhere safe, and you'd like enriching. You'd like fun and safe and enriching, but you need somewhere for them to go. and there aren't always that many opportunities, and it's expensive. And the hours don't allow you to drop them off before your work and pick them up after your work. In the summer, you have to shunt them from a morning program to an afternoon program. It's quite challenging.
It is. I know one of our local summer programs was like from 9 to 11 a.m. And I thought, that's so cute. And that's great. And you're maybe checking a box, but you're really not helping anybody. It's just
Right.
2 hours, And so I digress on that. And anyways, really just like bridging into how beautiful and innovative St. George's Independent School is. And that is, for anyone listening or watching, definitely do your research on St. George's and learn more about just the enriching education that they have and innovation there. And so you stay there for 18 years, and then you are attracted to the Children's Museum of Memphis. How does that relationship form?
I ended up on the board at the Children's Museum of Memphis. So basically, I've been demoted into this position. So I was on the board there because of my background. So I was there not for treasure, but for time and talent, as they say in the nonprofit fundraising world. So I was taking a look at the exhibits and the programming, and as part of a committee of other like-minded individuals, play therapists and psycholinguists and educators and that sort of team, and making recommendations. And so it's super easy to fall in love with a children's museum, and ours is not the exception to the rule in any way, shape, or form. It is, our staff fall in love with it. Our management team is in love with it. The board falls in love with it. It's really easy to be kind of obsessed and enamored rather than kind of like wah-wah. So it's not hard to get drawn in at all. It's like a black hole. It draws you in, but a good one. And so the museum was going through a period. I had never intended to go in to run a children's museum. I actually figured I would, end my career probably consulting in the education sector, and wasn't looking for anything when this kind of happened. So they were looking for an executive director after a period of change. I had been kind of itching to get my hands on the museum. So some of the recommendations we were making, got used and some didn't. And I was super busy. So it was sort of hard to allot the time. If I can, I really like to do things that are mission driven, where I think I can move a needle. I really want to create positive change, whether it's working with an individual, a family, an employee, a colleague, anybody that I'm trying to help. I really only want to do that if I think there's a way to fix it, if there's a way to improve things. And that really gives me energy. I get really excited about if we can move things forward and feel better about things. So I could see, and you referenced this probably better than I would be able to, but here I am. I was the son of an interior designer and artist and a contractor and developer. And then I studied early learning. So I was a child development and parenting person. So I'm at the Children's Museum of Memphis, and I know what to do here. I know how to make this. I know how to improve the architecture, the aesthetics, and do all the educational underpinnings and the programming all across the board. So for me, a single walk through the museum is filled with all the ideas that I want to do simultaneously to improve and add and augment. It's also filled with the observation of what's working beautifully, and that gives next step ideas too. So anything that's working beautifully comes with a couple of ideas about, we could take it in this direction and even go further. And so it's an exciting journey. My poor family should be really tired of hearing me talk about it.
I can imagine. And it really is, like you said, this culminating moment of your parents and upbringing in their fields and then your expertise. I mean, thank goodness you were there at the right time, because I can't imagine the Children's Museum of Memphis being led by anyone else. And so it's been really great to see, not only as a father, but as a community member, seeing the innovative educational spaces within the Children's Museum, but then also how you're now fine-tuning the existing exhibits, renovating them, reforming them, and providing these STEAM elements throughout. So for those that are listening that have not been to the Children's Museum of Memphis, quickly walk us through the spaces within the museum.
Okay, sure. We have 60,000 square feet, a little over, and there are some very quintessentially children's museum that were in the original design of the museum and were designed really beautifully well. There's a mini cityscape, and in a children's museum, that means it's like a little town built out at sort of 3/4 scale from adult scale or less, and it's got a dentist's office, and it's got a bank and a garage and a grocery store, etc., theater. And those things are designed for children to be able to step straight into them and know how adults function in those spaces. And they thrive and smile, and they come back over and over and over again. So going into a grocery store, for example, which is one of the longstanding favorite exhibits in the museum for over 30 years, they've been in a cart as a passive bystander in grocery stores basically every week for their entire lives. And they see what an adult does. This is how we get our food in the house, so it's important. And the selections we make determine the snacks and meals I get to have later. Do I get my favorites or stuff that I don't like so much? Is this boring stuff or really, really stuff that makes me want to open the bag right away? But most often kids are kind of passive in that situation. They're wired to observe us, to look at what's things we do all the time. The reason they want our keys, our car keys, and our remote controls is because we always have them in our hands and are using them constantly. And so it must be an important adult behavior. So they want to see, oh, this must be important. It's in your hand. Give it to me. I want to be important and do important things too. And so you put them in an adult environment scaled down for them, and they get a huge grin on their face, and they start acting out the schemas or stereotyped role play story of what you do in a grocery store or a dentist office or on a stage in a theater. So those things are designed for them to practice being adults in playful, creative, pretend scenarios. And they're wired to learn and practice behaviors that way. It's one of their primary things. They're really brilliant at it. Then we've got additional and beyond the cityscape and pretend play learning experiences we have, which, by the way, we've infused with all sorts of spatial reasoning, financial literacy, artistic and math technology endeavors, all intentionally. So it's not just the role play, but we then have a really state-of-the-art, gorgeous art and innovation lab that's newer. We launched that during COVID. We were super productive during that time, stressful time, but a really productive time for us. And we've got gorgeous hands-on curriculum in that space every day that's changing out all the time. And we've got Memphis area artists that are really at the top of their field or that are up and coming, that their art is on display, their bios are on display, and they come in and do workshops. We've got a half of a cargo plane and an air traffic control tower, which is one of the kids' favorites, to sit in a pilot seat and flip, 300 switches and dials, Yeah. Yeah. So they're super always excited about that. And it's because it's real and they know it's a real cockpit. They can tell those were the real switches, even though they're a little old. Then we have a brand new, just had the ribbon cutting on a state-of-the-art Mississippi River exhibit called The Great River, because Mississippi was originally Mississippi from the Ojibwe who first discovered it on their journey across our continent. And so we've got all of these beautiful, everything from sort of the ecology around rivers and wetlands, the Mississippi flyway, which is the migratory birds that a very large percentage of North America's birds use the Mississippi as their pathway north and south. We've got hydroelectric power highlighted on there so that if you get more water running through the dam, which the children control, it lights up the city of Memphis model that is custom built onto that. So and then there's everything down to like vortexes and a mushroom water sort of cloud that fills with steam that are more like the science and physics of fluid dynamics and that sort of stuff. You move on to a really beautiful and recently renovated large space for 4 and unders we could call toddler gardens. That's all sensory and categorization and pretend play. Super lovely space that's really charming. And then we've got, real life fire trucks and fire station and all of that. We've got about 16,000 square feet of the newest part of the building that was originally designed by predecessors leading the museum to be an event rental space for weddings and receptions and things like that, but not really intended for children to use. We're turning it all into museum space for children. So that will become 16,000 square feet plus of STEM or STEAM-based learning. We'll have a clean maker space. The designs are all in for that. We're putting out requests for grant funding for it. But a clean maker space that'll be 3D printing, robotics, computer coding. We'll have a couple of spaces that will be high-tech immersion rooms that are interactive. So a little bit like Beyond Van Gogh, if people got to see that when it was here recently, not at the museum, but in town. But that was projecting on all the walls, ceilings, and floors, immersing you in Van Gogh's art. The only difference would be in these, the children will be able to interact with those projections and tap on the wall and have them react to their touch. So super edgy on that. And there's more. We'll reface the entire mini cityscape so that instead of it looking like Anywhere USA, like a generic, suburban kind of area, it will become downtown Memphis with iconically downtown Memphis architecture, signage, and will include some of the experiences that really define and lift Memphis up, as well as sort of central to that cityscape experience.
I love that so much. It is such an incredible space, and whether you have children or not, grab your friends' kids, grab your cousins, nephews, nieces, whatever, and you have to experience the Children's Museum of Memphis for yourself. Because when I was there for the grand opening of the Mississippi River exhibit, you had mentioned so eloquently that it's going to be hard to keep the adults' hands off of this river exhibit as well. And I saw that firsthand, not only in myself and trying to make the city of Memphis light up, but also that mushroom cloud with like the different steam that's coming off. And it was, and it is such a defining space for creativity, innovation, and for children to dream and realize that all of whatever they dream to be is possible. And so it is so fun to not only take my kids, but then as a people watcher myself, react to other children and their families from different socioeconomic backgrounds who may, the closest they may get to downtown Memphis is the Children's Museum of Memphis. And so providing them the opportunity to see it. And what's so brilliant and beautiful about the nonprofit space in Memphis specifically that I've found in my career too is the collaboration over competition. And so some of the great ways that you collaborate with organizations like Porter-Leath to provide some low cost or free family memberships. Talk about some of those collaborations there.
Sure. Thank you for asking that. It's very important to make sure that this is available for all children. All children have the right. Our community really should have, I wouldn't want to call it a burden, but it really should be on our short list of things that we make sure we provide for each generation. opportunities to fall in love with learning, opportunities for regular enrichment. We actually know now from the latest brain imaging studies that are really quite astonishing that the brain wires itself or builds itself onto environmental demands so that you have a processing kind of computer in there that was designed specifically to succeed and function in the world you're in with the kind of processing demands that you're going to be given. What that means is if young children are not exposed to enrichments, they don't build out the structures in the brain to process those kinds of information, literally. So impoverishment, and also it turns out now stress, ongoing stressors, actually inhibit brain development and refining brain functioning. So actually building out the synapses that would process, that would push information throughout the brain, and then also refining those so that they could process faster and more information at a time. So it's not enough for us to wait until children go to school and think that learning happens in first, second, third, fourth grade, that it really happens in middle school and high school. Really, it starts day one in the language environment in the home. And that looks like one of the biggest predictors. Enrichments and a warm, responsive environment that is language rich look like they're the biggest predictors of long-term cognitive and emotional and physical health success. So we have really poignant data now on that. That means every children's museum, every nonprofit involved in families and children, and our community as a whole, in my opinion, should be pretty bullish on early learning. We should think it's one of our top priorities to invest in. We should celebrate wherever that's happening, and we should contribute and figure out how to grab an oar and row in that direction, because our children deserve it. And they're wired for us to do that, and they're perfectly ready for us to pick up that oar for them and go build a successful future for them. But they don't have control over it. We do. So we have to build out the enrichment. So that being said, soapbox, I apologize. So
I agree.
We really have worked to partner with a couple of groups that have access to families that really are deserving of some additional enrichment, who are already getting some enrichment services through their organizations. That allows us also not to have them have to provide some proof at the cash register that they're in need of services. They're members already. And so that is really important to us, because that in of itself is a barrier and can have people get tired of trying to access enrichments and not knowing whether you're going to be received warmly or not. When you try to do those things, can put people off the whole journey of trying to find out, is this for my child? Is this for my family? And so the partnerships allow us, instead of just doing an all call and seeing who can come, which often means people who, like, for example, a free Tuesday or something, which is very standard in the world to try to do something like that. The problem is, who's off of work on a Tuesday afternoon and who has transportation on that day to go do that? So really that all call is not targeted at the most important groups. And so we try to do something that's a little more structured and targeted so that we can partner with groups that can get them here instead of just saying it's available. And groups that can help the families know, no, this is for you. This is a big deal. This is part of being part of this group. And so that piece, like Porter-Leath's kids are the preschool, the kids that are receiving, and their schools are state-of-the-art and gorgeous, and they're located in areas of our city that need bolstering. And so we partner with them knowing that they're already serving the community that we're interested in, and that those kids are getting enrichment 5 days a week when school's going. So we give them a place to come after school and on the weekends and during breaks, summer. And then we know maybe together we can move the needle, push a little harder on the enrichment piece. And we have lots of other initiatives involved. So it would take a while to describe how many partnerships we have, but St. Jude families come in free, Le Bonheur House families come in free. We really are honing in on what are the disruptions in children's lives and families' lives that have been associated with declining school performance and health. And let's aim at partnering with groups that are targeting, trying to give services to those family disruptions. And so that is helping us make sure that we're casting our net in varied ponds and widely, and with a lot of thought.
Well said. And I love the fact that you're still thinking about the dignity of those parents that may come to the cash register and think, okay, am I going to have to, yes, my child is part of this organization and we've already proved ourselves in need of additional services and help. And then to not have that barrier in the way and for them to come in knowing that they're a member, knowing that they're cared for, knowing that they too deserve and are worthy to be in this space to learn and grow. I mean, it has to be emotional at times for these families as well, because they may not have had that access when, previously growing up. And so to provide that for their children is monumental, and to work with these other nonprofits. I mean, to me, it is still mind blowing that preschool is not a standardized, because I was privileged enough to go to preschool and just assume that it was just a nationwide thing. And then when I moved down to where we live, it was very eye-opening to me that people had to pay hundreds or even somewhat thousands of dollars to put their kids into preschool. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. So there's my soapbox for this. But thank you to you and the Children's Museum for really making a concerted effort to then partner with these organizations, like you said, that are already providing services to the demographics that you are yearning to work with and provide these opportunities to. So let's switch over to your personal life a little bit more, and then we're going to have a lightning round. How do you balance your professional responsibilities with your personal life and family?
Well, poorly, and in between. So I've had various phases. I'm not 22 anymore. I've had various phases in my career where I've done it better than others. I have typically had jobs or careers, or maybe it's my approach, where I work long hours. And I've been super, super lucky, though, that my focus on child development and then being in a school environment meant that while my children were in pre-K through 12th grade, they were in the same organization that I was working at. And so that meant I had a little bit of flexibility to see their programs all the time. Even though I worked long hours, I was in the building next door. And I was always there. If they suddenly spiked a fever or something, they didn't have to wait for somebody 40 minutes to come and get them, who was stressed about having to leave work yet again. As somebody who worked in a school, they understand when your kids are sick, they want them home. And so you could do that, or I could pop them in my office and not let them expose anybody else to what they had. So I was super lucky in that there was flexibility in that time where I worked really long hours, but I also was with my kids were with me, and then we had breaks together. So you had fall, winter, spring, and summer breaks that were longer, even though I worked year round. Summer didn't quite work that way for administrators. But so that was really good. My wife, Anne, traveled extensively, and that varied throughout her career, but she could travel 50 or 60% of her time at some points. Wow. And that was with us with two small children, both of us working well over 40-hour weeks. And I think it was harder for her because her work was separate from our children. And so that meant, because I could make it to a program for sure, like a kindergarten play or something, but it would take her 3 hours out of a workday to go see a 40-minute program. And that's harder. And so she went and saw more than you could have ever thought that she would be able to get to, because she prioritized her travel. She would fly overnight in order to get back. So she'd be there for in the morning to see, even if it was only for 20 minutes, to see them off to school. And regular phone calls and those kinds of things too. And then we spent our all the family vacations and all our extra time, our evening times, our weekend times, were centered around family. So if the work week was busy, we didn't do a bunch of adult things away from our kids and separate from each other as spouses. So I think we balanced that really well in terms of we're together doing together stuff when we're not drawn by our work. So that certainly worked for our style. I work really hard now in the museum nonprofit world. There's sort of a long-standing expectation that the CEO at the top is working around the clock and that everybody else can't say, hey, my child is sick, I need to go home, because the CEO is working around the clock and there's not going to be a reception to that. I do a lot of my work that is after hours from home in the evenings, in the early morning, on the weekends. I'll be doing stuff that everybody can't see, so there's not that pressure. I actually think that we can get most of our work done in a 40-hour work week. I think that it's important for our work at a children's museum, if it's going to be creative and smart and inspired, we should be laughing and have enough energy to be excited about the work and for it to give us some additional energy. I think if we are under a huge amount of pressure and the deadlines were unreasonable, that our work wouldn't be as good. So there's a good deal of laughter in our team, and there's some flexibility. If you're getting your stuff done, we can flex things. So I think it's good to take perspective, and we as a family always prioritize those family times, knowing that we had long hours. The rest was family.
So how old are your kids now?
Old. So remember, I started my stuff right after the pyramids were built. So we have two boys. Carter, our oldest, has been married for a year and teaches calculus in Collierville. And his wife, Moya, teaches biology in the same school. And then Sean, our younger son, is in his last year of college. He's studying neuropsychology and wants to go on for his PhD after this. And this last year, he's given his first presentations at conferences and has a major national conference presentation coming up. He's being lucky enough to work with a professor in neuroscience who's publishing really amazing work, doing and publishing really amazing work. So he's getting that luck factor and then applying the work factor. I was thinking he should pick something outdoors to do out in the sun, because it's a lot of school.
Well, it seems like the generational inspiration continues with the work that you and your wife Anne are doing to then replicate into the work that they are doing and the passion that they have. So that's great to see that live on there. Let's switch to our last lightning round. What hobbies or activities do you enjoy in your free time?
I read a lot, or a little. Let's see. And I don't read lots of highbrow stuff. I force myself to read the stuff in my industry, and it's not total force, but I do it like it's work as opposed to pleasure. I read, murder mysteries and stuff like that. So I like entertainment during my entertainment time mostly. I do try to make sure I get a couple of the really each year, some of the books that are everybody's just saying you can't live without, that are not in that genre. We used to do a lot of water skiing and tennis. I'm old and broken by now. I'm just good to be sitting upright. So that has gone a little bit by the wayside. Sadly, we walk a fair amount, which is funny to say for exercise, but it's beautiful outside in Memphis a lot of the time. And I'm trying to think. I do a little bit of art just because that's sort of been a through line in my life from when I was little. Not a lot, but a little bit. I don't have a ton of time. I have a tendency to design exhibits in my spare time for the children's museum.
Very fun. Okay, so you and Anne are going out for a date night in Memphis. Where do you go? Where do you eat? What do you do?
we sort of have a habit of being at home because we're always working.
Yeah.
And so when we weren't working, we were at home. And so we go to all the usual places, and both hole in the wall and to fancy. Deli Mexicana is an old favorite on Germantown Parkway. If you've never been to it, it is authentic Mexico City cuisine that is everything. All the ingredients are picked up that morning, fresh, like in the top-notch 5-star kind of Michelin restaurant. And the owners there, Pepe and Jonathan, father and son, are just ask them about the menu, and that's almost most of the experience, except the food is like event changing, life changing. Have you been there before?
I have. It is incredible and so authentic that you walk in, when you walk out, you realize, oh wait, I'm still in Memphis. I feel like I just had an experience in Mexico. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah. So, and that one's just a favorite. It's a different one because there are lovely fancy restaurants all over them, and so we get out a little bit.
Well, I love that you talk about the breadth of restaurants in Memphis, because like you said, I mean, you can go to holes in the wall that are incredible to those, like you said, the 5-star Michelin type places, and that you're going to run into people that whether it's
Yes.
the hole in the wall or not. And so it's really fun to know that all walks of life enjoy all walks of food in Memphis. So we talked about your family, we talked about the work that you're doing and some of the things that you enjoy. What sort of legacy, you're still creating it, but at the end of the day, decades from now, when you have the Children's Museum of Memphis, and you've got the, dedicated to Dr. Stewart Burgess and the decades of work that he has done, what legacy do you hope to leave through your work in child development and education?
I joke about being ancient and broken. I probably don't think in terms of legacy. I'm not making this up. I don't need my name on it. I actually don't enjoy being recognized that much, which is really sort of weird. I love to be in a conversation with anybody about the things we're talking about, but I always think it's sort of embarrassing to run into people out in the world who know who you are and just I don't know. So I've never really thought in terms of needing to leave a legacy that is known to be about me. What I would say is, what do I want to leave in place? What do I want to have? What needles do I want to move forward? And those I'm pretty serious about. So I would really like to elevate the greater Memphis communities, to help support the greater Memphis communities' understanding of the really vital importance of early learning in setting up our next generation for success. I hope to see a state-of-the-art children's museum left behind for others to be the caretakers of. I want it to have rich, robust programming that includes outreach that is really bolstering the education going on and services going on throughout our community. I would like to see children's museum-like installations throughout the city, so that when you're sitting at a bus stop, the plexiglass behind you has a computer coding game you can do in your head that builds brain architecture and a love of learning, and to have signs in the grocery store so that when you're walking down the cereal aisle, there's a Q&A sign that's like, can you find the letter K? So that we're engaging children in language, in search and find, in comparisons, really getting them to process the world around them. And so that they're prepared that when they get to kindergarten, they're itching to put all those factoids and skills and knowledge into the structure you've built. If the structure's under-articulated, there's no room for those facts to go. So I really want to do that. That's if I can help our community move in those directions, then I think the children deserve it. And but I don't need it to be like my specific legacy.
Well, I think that's very honorable, and clearly, I mean, you're doing tremendous innovative work. And I love the fact that you don't just keep it inside the walls of the Children's Museum. It really is across the greater Memphis region and really could be replicated nationwide and needs to be. There's, my opinion there. But I love just even the fact of you talking about and exploring, the bus stops and the grocery stores, because it's really, as a father, it's making me reconsider the time that I spend with my kids and almost the gamification of everyday life and how we can make even some of the mundane tasks that we do with our children, both our own children and those that we work with across the average day, to then provide them with experiences that enrich and encourage them to explore and think and innovate. So it's been such a pleasure to get this time to dive into the world of early childhood development, education, and really get to learn more about the heart of your work. Where can people go to learn more? Maybe follow you. I know you're on LinkedIn. Where can people follow you and your efforts, and then follow and support the Children's Museum of Memphis?
CMOM.com. Our website has a whole section called the Learn section, and there are multiple places. So there are tabs right on the front homepage where you land when you first come on that you can click on Learn, and there are kind of mini articles as well as parent Q&A, so parent questions that I've responded to. There are also at-home learning activities that you could do using things that you probably have in your own closets and kitchens at home, so it doesn't cost anything, that are super enriching and give you kind of that idea of how to get started on. So I want to do some enrichment, but where do I start? And one of the things I would say, based on your comment as a parent and thinking about where you can augment or sort of reinvent what some of those moments in your life and make better use of them. One thing, don't let I talk about the import of this, and people sometimes tighten up and think, I haven't been doing that all the time. I feel guilty about that. What harm have I done? Stop. That's not going to be helpful at all. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. I was not a perfect parent. That's not a thing. We all have physical and emotional demands put on us every day. And there are moments when we're tired and we're not our best selves, where we're hangry. And so we're not perfect. You do want to limit the extent to which your children have to bear that burden. It does affect them. You do not have to be enriching them 24/7 with a curriculum you stayed up all night designing creatively yourself. But little bits of language in and story times that are consistent, little bits here and there. We get stuck in a restaurant, and nowadays everybody's on their device, waiting for their table or waiting for their food to be delivered. Used to be you played I Spy if you were doing a good job, and it kept your kids busy so they didn't misbehave and annoy other people. But the truth is, you were building brain architecture while you were doing language and observing and comparing and contrasting, or 20 questions. And those little moments of language and observe really set up the brain for success. So, and then daily reading to your kids. You don't have to do everything in it. You don't have to be doing education all the time. You should be reading every day to your children as soon as they're old enough to hold up their heads long enough to look at the picture. You should be talking to them and responding to their signals and describing the world around them and asking them questions and playing games and joining in on their play and adding some language and observation has been shown in multiple studies to really elevate children's growth. So it's small things, but consistently can go a long way, and it doesn't have to cost anything. So I think that's really important to know. The accessing me, I am not all over social media. So the LinkedIn and the pieces that are coming out from CMOM, if you see on a social media platform about CMOM, there may be an article from me. And then on our Learn section of our website, you also will see sometimes magazine and commercials or news, news segments where I'm sharing child development information, and those pieces are out there to be accessed. Like we did a whole series on mental health minutes that we called mental health minutes, but that were designed for helping children on healthy trajectories towards positive mental health as adults. And there are lots of little things that can be done that are simple, actionable, don't cost money to really set kids up for long-term healthy trajectories. So we're putting pieces out like that all the time. So keep your eye peeled for that.
All right. Well, it has been a pleasure. Dr. Stewart Burgess, thank you for sharing how important it is to invest in early childhood education and how it ultimately is investing in our future. I mean, firsthand. Thank you for sharing your profound insights and experiences across this sector and how we can all be inspired as we communicate and be around children every day, and how we can inspire them and enrich them. Once again, CMOM.com, the Children's Museum of Memphis. You are sharing great insights on a regular basis, and you can keep in touch with Dr. Stewart Burgess there, or on LinkedIn, just search Dr. Stewart Burgess. Until next time, thank you so much for making a difference and powering the good in our community.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by CityCURRENT and powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
To learn more, to listen to past episodes, and to share your stories of other changemakers who are making a difference, visit citycurrent.com or call 901-321-1020.
Follow the conversation online using the handle @CityCURRENT or the hashtag #PowerTheGood.